everybody. My goodness. Ty and I are just back last month from a 5-month trip around the country all the way up to Vancouver, Canada, in that big coach that you might have seen out there in the parking lot. And we took the messages of hope on the road, speaking to people, as Bev said, in major cities around the country, and looking out at this sea of loving faces, so many of whom I recognize. I just have to tell you, there is no place like home. I have been so excited to share this story with you, this particular story. It unfolded on that journey. It was something that I never expected to happen, but it has this perfect beginning and ending with these incredible messages that I'm going to share with you today. And I've entitled it Heart Gifts. And I'm going to take all of you with me on this journey to the center of each of your universes, the heart, the very center of each one of us. I'm going to include in this talk some of our personal photos at a very unusual place called Antelope Canyon. Anybody ever been there? Just a few. When you see these pictures, you're going to want to go. It's in northern Arizona. And so it's fitting that as we begin this journey, we begin outside the entrance to Antelope Canyon, where just like with so many things in this physical world, what's on the outside doesn't always give away the indescribable beauty inside. Okay? Today I'm going to give you a stunning view of who and what all of us are. Spirit beings, temporarily in human form. And we all walk in two worlds at once. This physical world and the non-physical world. Many mystics claim that this physical world is an illusion. Have you ever heard that? Do you know it's true? Look very closely at this picture here. We're not actually holding a torch. We're holding a flashlight that's turned off. Can you see the light? That's from the light behind. The actual illusion is that this reality is the only reality. We are so intertwined with the unseen reality that it just creates this web of interconnections, and that's what I'm going to share with you today as I weave this story that actually started back in May. We had just left the villages. We got out to Colorado, and I flew to no other place than the ARE headquarters, this group being hosted by the ARE. That's in Virginia Beach, and I was very honored to be speaking at a conference there. Thanks, by the way, to Francis Rolfe for letting them know about me. And I shared the podium with this gentleman, Dr. Eben Alexander, who you may recognize, the author of Proof of Heaven. I also shared the podium with a couple of other really awesome evidential mediums, one named Maureen Hancock from Massachusetts, and the other Robert Brown, an evidential medium from England. And after I gave my talk, there was a line of people waiting to have books signed, and one man seemed to hang back. He waited to the end of the line, and when he came up, there were two things I noticed about him. One was this t-shirt that he wore with these wolves on it. It was just kind of jumping out at me. And the other was he was really intense, like this looks like a mugshot, doesn't it? And he introduced himself as Mike, and he told me that he'd lost a son. Now I perked up at that, because having lost a daughter, I have a very soft spot for people who've lost children. And he told me that his son went by the name Wolf, and that explains the wolf t-shirt. And then he told me how his son was killed the same way as our daughter, struck by lightning. So now he really has my attention. And he said to me, my son knew he was going to die. How is that possible? And I said, Mike, the soul knows. Often the soul knows when its time here in this physical world has passed. How do I know this? Because our Susan came to me in a very vivid dream 2 days before she passed. And she walked right up to me. I still see it clear as day, and that's how you know it was a visit. And she looked right at me and she said, the baby and I are fine, because Susan was 6 months pregnant at the time that she passed. So right away, I have this connection, this web of connection with this Mike fellow here. And I ran into him a couple times at the hotel where we were staying in Virginia Beach. And on the last morning, I saw him there with his wife, Beth. And it was as if these hands were propelling me out of my seat. And I walked up to them and I said, I want to give you a reading. They hadn't asked for one, but I said, this is my gift to you. And we were leaving, so I gave him my card and I said, just email me if you want a reading. So I flew back from Virginia Beach to Colorado and rejoined Ty, and we moved on to the west, and I didn't hear from Mike and Beth till July. And when he finally got through, he said, I've sent you several emails, but you must not have gotten them. And I tried one more time. Well, thank goodness he did. And he said, we'd really like to have that reading. So obviously we can't do it in person anymore. And we agreed to do a reading by Skype at the end of the week on Saturday morning in July. So here I am in bed in the coach Thursday morning, the Thursday before the reading. And I woke up at 5:45. And something just seemed a little bit off, and then I felt this presence step into my energy field, just like when I'm doing a reading, only I had just awakened. And the picture flashed before my eyes of Mike and Beth, and I said, you're a wolf, aren't you? And indeed, Wolf proceeded to tell me all about himself. And this has not happened too often, it's happened before, but this was so clear. I always keep pen and paper by my bed for occasions such as this. And I just started writing. And luckily, Ty has learned not to talk when he hears that pen scratching. And I filled page after page. And I kept turning the pages. And it was filled with evidence. So I got really excited. What do I mean by evidence? He wasn't just saying, say hi to my mom and dad, I'll be there on Saturday. He was telling me things about him and some really off-the-wall things. Now, I'm going to share some of those things with you now, but I made sure not to share any of this with Mike and Beth before the reading because I didn't want anything to taint that reading. If this was wrong, if I was somehow dreaming or making this up, I didn't want it to influence the reading. So all I did was send them an email with all of this information that I typed up out of the notebook. And I said, just give me one sentence, your reaction to this. And they wrote back and they said, we're blown away. I said, good. You can tell me specifics after the reading. So for now, realize that I didn't know which of these were accurate when we went into the reading on Saturday, but I want to give you a flavor for the kinds of things that came in this unexpected, unasked for reading. He showed me hieroglyphics. This is word for word how I wrote it in the dark. He showed me hieroglyphics and symbols. He's showing me a robed figure. He says the word druid, and that he had sacred rituals. Now I'm going to tell you why these are in green, because these are all accurate. They all describe Wolf as verified by his parents after I gave the reading. But just remember some of these things. He told me he wore a necklace, a guy's necklace, and with an amulet on it, absolutely verified by his parents. He said he's Mike Jr. Could have been anybody. He could have had any name, but he is indeed Mike Jr. Had a great respect for nature, outdoorsy, a loner, but very, very close to you, Mom and Dad. He showed me the peace sign and stressed it. He wanted everyone to love each other on a large scale. All of these things his parents verified. And then he flashed me the I love you sign in sign language. He went like this in my mind's eye, and I wrote it down. All in all, he gave me 46 scoreable items. 46 in the dark there. And the last thing he said was, have Mike and Beth score this like Gary. Now, what did he mean by that? Gary Schwartz, who Bev mentioned in the introduction, is a noted afterlife researcher who I've been working with over the past year. And Gary likes to make things scientific, as do I, because I want people to know this is real. So I asked Mike and Beth if they were willing, because Wolf had asked them to do this, to go through each item line by line and rate it according to Gary Schwartz's system. If it's an absolute hit, it gets a 6 or a 5, and then if it's not a hit, it gets a 1 or a 0. I won't go into the details. Other than that, it was very specific, and Dr. Schwartz wanted each line to have an explanation. Why did you rate it that way? So it wasn't just arbitrary. So they went through each of these, and then Gary had them go back and score it by using a cousin of Wolf's. That is what is known in scientific terms as a control, to show that this just isn't chance, that this fit Wolf. So if you just pick your cousin, a male cousin at random, and you said, would hieroglyphics make sense to him? Would he have had sacred rituals? Did he wear an amulet? Was he Mike Jr.? Do you see how none of these things would have matched a cousin, but they all matched Wolf? So then they sent all of this, including the scores for the cousin, to Gary Schwartz, who did his study and came up with these results. On the left, you see the percentage of hits. On the right are the percentages of misses. Wolf is in blue, the cousin is in red. So 74% of the things that came through unexpectedly with zero feedback from a client, because I'm just writing it as I hear it, were hits. But if it had been a cousin, only 5.6% would have been right. You see that? Gary said, with 46 scoreable pieces of evidence, it was one of the best visits of his kind that he's ever seen. But you know what I said? I looked at that and I said, but I was always an A student. That's a C. That's a C. They say that if you're a perfectionist, you shouldn't be a medium. So I think I'm in the wrong line of work here, but I'll never give up wanting to hear everything they have to say to us. So of the things that were misses, I want to share some of them with you. And they're in red because their parents couldn't tell me why Wolf was telling me these things. Look at this. He showed me a red wagon, very specific, radio flyer, hitting a stone with a chisel. The next one, I wrote it down exactly as I heard it. It came through as pajamas, jama mama. And I wrote those question marks in the dark. What the heck is that? Pajamas, jama mama. Pajamas, jama mama. I didn't know what he was saying. He talked about somebody being uber intelligent. And I wrote, why uber? That's German for over. And then he showed me somebody doing experiments, like science experiments and beakers. Watches over you like a hawk. He made me underline hawk and showed me the number 14 right after the hawk. And then showed me a bird soaring and then a bird hitting a window. And all of these things that his parents couldn't confirm, I would say, well, has a bird hit a window recently? And his dad said, well, maybe a long time ago. And I said, no, that doesn't count. We can all remember seeing a bird hit a window. And then he showed me somebody dancing around like a Native American in a desert scene and an Indian on a cliff looking out. None of these things made sense to his parents, and certainly not to me. But I couldn't understand, how could I get 75% of the things so clear, and then these things just off the wall? But now remember, it's now coming up on Saturday morning. I don't know which of all these things I share with you were right or wrong. So Saturday morning, thank goodness for Skype video, here's Mike and Beth showing up on my computer screen. And I said, you told me that blew you away, so now I know what Wolf feels like. We'll ask him to step in. And I shifted my consciousness, asked Wolf to come in. Right away, my heart started palpitating, I was stuttering and shaking, and I said, whoa, is he powerful? I have never felt a more powerful spirit just giving a reading. And they said, we had a reading with Maureen Hancock of Massachusetts. She said the very same thing. She'd never felt a more powerful spirit. And then the information just flowed. As powerful as he was, it just came one after the other. And I want to share with you some of the things that came through in that reading. I said, he's showing me writing things and drawing things that don't make sense. Now he's showing me pyramids and triangles and spirals, circles, planets, and says, this is where I came from. What does that mean? And then he said it was like going home to draw these things, like going home. The reason I'm putting these in different colors is his parents confirm. He wrote things all the time and drew and wrote things that didn't make sense, especially those kinds of shapes. Now, it was like going home to draw these things. You can't score that. You can't say that was right or wrong because we don't have evidence of the other side. I described the personality that I felt as someone very kind and loving, which they confirmed. And he said, now I'm helping young ones to transition to the other side. When things are backed up by evidence like this, then we can believe the things that we can't really prove. And then he showed me this red wagon. I said, I remember this coming up when he visited me the other morning, the red wagon. Did that mean anything to you then? Because I didn't know at this point. And they said, no, but it's funny. The red wagon, the radio flyer came up in the reading with Maureen Hancock too. And every little kid has a wagon, but why would he bring it up both mornings? He showed me a labyrinth. This is very significant, so remember the labyrinth. And then I said, papers, papers, papers. There are papers everywhere. And he says, thanks for keeping them safe, Dad. And his dad confirmed, every square inch of his walls at home was covered with drawings and things he'd written. And after he passed, his dad had a professional photographer go in and photograph it for posterity's sake, then had them all lovingly taken down, and he keeps them all safe at home. So Wolf knows that. And then he said, I was in both worlds at once. Remember, I mentioned this already. This physical world and the world he's in now, the world of pure spirit. And he said, it was very busy in my head. And his dad said, he always used to say that. And then Wolf told me his brain was wired differently than most people and that he got poor grades in school. His dad confirmed that too. And I said, he's telling me he had difficulty holding a job down. Absolutely correct. Then Wolf used a word that I did not expect to hear. He said the word schizophrenia. And Beth said, oh yes, he was diagnosed schizophrenic. And then he explained again, I was in both worlds and unable to function on a normal baseline and stressed, but there was nothing wrong with my heart. And then he said, and we can't score this one, this is to help bring more empathy to those with mental illness, as if he knew that this reading would get out and reach more people. And I said, now he's showing me he had a funny way of showing you how much he loved you, but he means this literally, like he showed you how much he loved you. And he said, you got it right the other morning. Every time we said goodbye, he did this. I love you, Dad. So that was very accurate. Now I'm starting to see that that morning visit was right on target. And the last thing he said, which was very prophetic, I'll be around. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Wolf Pasikarnis. Okay, he died at age 29. That was only part of the reading. There was a lot more. But there's a reason I spent so much time on all of that evidence. Wolf wants you to pay attention. So you may have been drifting off to this point, but I have a feeling that's about to change. On the day that Wolf died, he went to this cemetery. That's where he chose to meditate. He went there all the time and would sit under a beech tree. And he had just been hanging out at a cafe with some of his friends, and he said, I have to go now. And he loped on down the hill to his favorite beech tree here. This is a cemetery called Burial Hill. It's in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and it's the very first burial ground of our new settlers. And the sign says this is a sacred place, and that's where he chose to meditate, a kind of unusual place. So I have to go now. He goes and sits there, and the police said that the storm that came up was very localized. They'd never seen anything like it. Suddenly the sky got really, really dark. In fact, the policeman called his wife and said, do you see this storm? She was across town. She said, it's blue sky here. And the lightning came down and snatched Wolf away just like that. Very deadly, killed him on the spot. So Wolf's parents, Mike and Beth, got word of this and drove to Plymouth. And they went right away to the tree where he was killed. They stopped and they bought 2 red roses. This is their photo taken of the red roses that they put right on the spot where he was killed. The next day they went into his house. Do you remember in the reading where he said, papers, papers, papers? This is part of the walls behind him. You see all those papers behind him, all neatly covering the walls. This was nothing new to Mike and Beth. But what was new was one new bit of poetry that he'd written that they'd never seen before, right here, up on the wall. Let me share with you Wolf's last poem. Spirit of great healer, awaken within this heart. Peace and tranquility flow like water. the time has come to allow the light of nature to take my soul, to free my soul. Is that a little prophetic? What were his last words to his friends? I have to go now. The soul knows. No wonder Mike was confused. How could he know? But there's more. This picture you see here, that's an eye that Wolf drew. In the center, you see the yin-yang symbol. That'll become important in a minute, so remember that. But what's this here on the right? A beech tree with 2 roses. Are you paying attention now? I'd never seen anything like this before. But there's so much more. So let's go back to Wolf's apartment. Can you see the chaos? This is pretty much what was going on inside his mind. But I looked at that picture and I said to Mike and Beth, you know, this looks pretty darn neat for somebody that had an apartment like that. Was it always that neat? And he said, not at all. Doesn't that look like somebody that knew they were going away? Yeah, everything's straightened up. And Mike told me that he used to rearrange every one of those pictures in every room every 3 months. And 1 month before he passed, he said to his dad, I'm done moving the stuff around, Dad. As if he somehow knew. Now when you see what's going on inside his head, it's easier to see that he was different from most people. But even though he was diagnosed with mental illness, the spirit that spoke to me in that reading was perfectly sane, incredibly loving, incredibly powerful, so powerful that he had me stuttering. He was telling me, I'm a little higher than those when they first passed to the other side, and I could believe that from the way he felt. But now we know that he was in 2 worlds at once. And he said, but there's nothing wrong with my heart. I'm going to stress that again. And this was shown up as I did my research about him. This was a little tribute in the Massachusetts newspaper when he passed. And it describes a time when Wolf found a guy in the gutter crying. And Wolf took him home and helped him get off drugs. Now, how many people would do that? We would consider that dangerous and not advisable. But he would stop and help people in the street if they were in a bad way. Very typical of him. I want to share with you a quote from Edgar Cayce. It's very appropriate here, especially since we're with the ARE group. In response to a client who asked Edgar Cayce, am I slightly mentally ill? Cayce replied, no, save as to who would be the judge. Every individual is slightly mentally ill to someone else. It's all relative. Don't look at me that way, Ty. The ARE connection is truly amazing. Remember, this is where I met Mike and Beth. The reading never would have happened if we hadn't met there. So on the last day of the conference, Mike and Beth were waiting for the shuttle, and they were wandering around the grounds, and they walked up the stairs here and saw here a labyrinth. Hadn't seen it till then. Remember, the labyrinth came up in the reading. When Mike took a look at what's in the center of the labyrinth, it stopped him in his tracks, and he said, Beth, do you recognize that? And she said, I sure do. Okay, do you see the dolphins in the middle of it? This is the labyrinth of the ARE. 10 years earlier, Wolf drew this. A yin-yang symbol with 2 dolphins in it. Compare them. Look at that. I called the lady who had that labyrinth designed. I said, where did you come up with this? She said, I just thought it would be a good idea. After Wolf died, long after he drew this picture. But I find it interesting that you have different sizes of bricks here, and he has different designs here and different designs out there, and the dolphins, I've never seen anything like that before. Okay, so all of these interesting connections just have me befuddled, and we're riding down the road in our coach. Ty was driving, and all I can do is think about this reading and how amazing it is and how powerful Wolf's presence was. And as we're riding down the road, all of a sudden, this image pops into my face. This great big wolf right in my face. And I remembered this. I had seen this just a few months earlier when I was having a session with a wonderful energy worker here, and I was deep in meditation, and this wolf got right in my face. And when I finished the session with this woman, I described it to her, and she said, well, that must be one of your totems, which is a sacred symbol, an animal as a sacred symbol. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but now all of a sudden, it's in my face again, and I felt Wolf step in and recognize his energy by this time. And he started showing me the connections, okay? Both lost to lightning, just like my stepdaughter. And Wolf wrote so much poetry, and I'd been getting poetry from Spirit for well over a year. So I said to him mentally, Ty doesn't know that I'm conversing with this spirit over here in the passenger seat. I said, if you have been helping me or are somehow helping me now, can you send me a sign? And he said, in answer to that, get some runes. You know what runes are? They're little stones with symbols on them. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing the symbols that he showed me in that morning visit, the unexpected visit. So I'm kind of up on technology. I have my iPad in my lap. I go on, and I find a rune app. Why not? I'm not going to say, Ty, go find me a metaphysical store so I can buy a bag of stones. I've never had them, never played with them, but they had a rune app on the iPad. And I hear, cast one stone. First thing I noticed, though, is these symbols across the top. These are the symbols that are on each of the stones, one each. I learned that there are 24 stones in a set of runes. Some of you probably know this, and each one has a different symbol on it. I have no idea what they stand for. I don't know what each symbol is about, but Wolf is in my ear saying, cast one stone. So the way you cast it is you put your finger on the screen and you push right there one time. So I said, are you helping me? Cast one stone, and there, this little stone shows up in the middle of the tree, and that's the symbol that came up with it, an arrow pointing upward. See it up there? It came up by chance, random, out of 24. I have no idea what that arrow means. Are you helping me? So what you do is you click on the stone. It's pretty cool, and it tells you your answer. So I start reading, and it says, Tiwaz is the warrior rune. I thought, I was a warrior. For 20 years, I wore a uniform. It's named for the mythological warrior who sacrificed his hand, and this is when I gasped, in order to ensnare the giant wolf Fenris. Now, what are the chances of that? The guy sends me to get a rune set. I have no idea what it stands for. There are 24 stones. He says cast one when I ask, are you helping me? And the one that comes up deals with the wolf. Do you see why I gasped? Ty gets used to me with this kind of stuff that's going on. So right away I share it with him, and even he admitted that was pretty cool. I felt like I was in some kind of altered reality. So I decided then and there to research the wolf as a sacred symbol. And here's what I learned on the internet, driving down the highway. Wolves are highly misunderstood animals. In reality, wolves are friendly and social creatures with a strong sense of family. This sounds just like this kid I brought through, doesn't it? Highly misunderstood, friendly and social, strong sense of family. Aggression is something they avoid. Absolutely, the guy with the peace sign. Wolves represent the spirit of freedom. Remember that word, because the wolf is a teacher and a pathfinder, and he comes when we need guidance in our lives. And I'm always saying every morning in my meditation and my prayers, guide me, lead me, teach me. So that got me thinking about some of the other symbols that came up in his reading, especially this one, because remember, he drew it in the labyrinth with the dolphins, and he drew it in the center of that eye on his last poem. So I looked up the yin-yang symbol, and here's what it said. Within this circle, we see the light and the dark, forever in opposition and forever in harmony. The symbol represents perfect balance. The two opposites are not at war, but in harmony. And balance is the key point here. And it was funny, from that moment on, everywhere I looked, these two words kept popping up. You know how that goes? Freedom and balance. Freedom and balance. So this is now the end of July, just this past July. And we go away for 5 months every summer. We've done the tour last 2 summers. And right in the middle, I come home because my mom and I share the same birthday. Hi, Mom. And so I came home at the end of July to be with Mom. And our wonderful friends, Lynn and Bailey, I know Lynn's here somewhere. Hi, Lynn, where are you? Lynn, where are you? It's the other Lynn, Lynn Spence. Picked us up at the airport, brought Mom to pick me up. Ty stayed back with the dogs, and picked me up at Orlando Airport. And so we had this hour and 10 minutes to kill on the way back. And when we stopped chatting about the trip, I said, you know, I got to tell you about this reading that I gave recently and all this amazing stuff that's been going on. And I talked about all the evidence, but then I talked about this stuff that came through in the unexpected visit. See, I'm still obsessing about this C, okay? And I brought up especially this red wagon, the radio flyer wagon, because why would he mention it twice? And why would the other medium get it too? And his parents didn't know what that was all about. Well, I didn't realize that when you tell something to Lynn Spence, she's not going to let it go. Because the next morning I get an email from her and she says, Suzanne, I can't stop thinking about that radio flyer. It triggered something in my mind, so I've been on the internet almost all night. And do you know there was a movie called Radio Flyer? And I've been looking up the reviews of that movie, and there might be something here. In fact, one of the reviewers even said, this movie is a little schizoid. Okay, so that's stretching it a little bit. What happened next is not stretching it at all, because the theme of the movie is about 2 little boys who come from a home where the parents are divorced. One of the boys' names is Mike. They go to live with their mom across the country, and she now has a new husband, and the stepfather is abusive. I called Mike, Wolf's dad. Remember, Wolf is also Mike. I said, I know that Beth is Wolf's stepmom, so I know you're divorced. Did she remarry? Yes, she did. And I'm sorry to ask you this, but do you know if Wolf's stepfather abused him? And he said, yes, I'm aware that he did. I said, okay, well, there's this movie about radio. It's called Radio Flyer, about these 2 boys, one named Mike, one was abused. And the movie is about these little kids who take this radio flyer wagon and put wings on it because all they want to do is go home. And what did Wolf say? It was like going home to draw these things. This came up in the reading several times. He was ready to go home. But home to him was not this physical world. It was the other world that he was in. So we all agreed, we can change that one to green now. One missing piece of the puzzle there. That was pretty clear. I mean, everything fit. But what's this other stuff? Pajamas, Jama Mama, and all that? I don't know. But we just kind of let it go, because I know if it's going to unfold, it'll unfold. So here I am back in the Villages, and I can tell you, I can go by that Barnes & Noble store over there 100 times and not need to go in, even though I love books. But if there is a book there with my name on it, not the books I wrote, but one that I'm supposed to read, I'll feel it, I'll know it, and I'll go in and be led right to it. And it's amazing how that works. So I'm driving by and I said, I hear you. I'm supposed to buy a book in there. So I go in and naturally go straight to the metaphysical section. And I'm standing there staring at the shelves and I'm scanning the titles, trying to figure out which one speaks to me. Well, I have to tell you, this has never happened before. The book didn't speak to me, it moved. One of those books, I'm looking at it, it went, ch-ch. And I looked to the side and I thought, that was unusual. And I looked back at it, and it went, ch-ch. But the really interesting thing was, I knew that was an illusion. Some people might call it a hallucination. I knew it was an illusion. I knew that if somebody had been standing with me, they would not have seen it move. But I heard it, and I saw it move clear as day, twice. And I know that we're all dealing with energy and consciousness here, so those of higher consciousness can manipulate anything they want. So why couldn't they manipulate my visual field and my auditory senses to make it appear as if that book moved, to get my attention? So I pulled it off the shelf, looked at the title, and said, oh no. Because it's a book about 2012 and Mayans and extraterrestrials. This is not something I would have pulled off the shelf. I mean, 2012 is old news, right? Nothing happened, we're still here. And Mayan calendar and extraterrestrials, except there's one little thing. Remember where he drew those spirals and planets and things and said, this is where I came from in the unexpected visit? So if I've learned anything, it's to be open-minded and just see where it leads. So I start leafing through this book. Eric von Däniken, by the way, is the one who wrote Chariot of the Gods. So he's respectable. And I look at the preface, and I don't see anything here. I flip through a couple more pages till I get to the introduction. I start reading it on the introduction, and Eric is talking about Michael, and my heart palpitated. That was very real. I said, I hear you. I bought the book. Okay, so I buy the book, and I take it home, but I couldn't get to it till the end of the day. And remember, Ty's back on the West Coast with the coach, so I'm home alone, and I crawl into bed, and I figure I'm going to start reading this book now and see why I was led to it. And I start to open the pages, and I hear, no, go straight to the pictures. You can see there's a center section with color photos. Okay? That's how clear the guidance is. I go straight to the pictures, and I said, okay, some Mayan stuff here, that's fine. But when I saw what this statue was, I almost fell off the bed. Are you ready for this? You know the name of this statue? Pachamama. Pajama Jama Mama. Do you hear that? In the book that moved is Pajama Jama Mama. And the piece of evidence above that was hitting a stone with a chisel, chiseling a message. This statue is covered with, the whole back of it is chiseled in stone with ancient Mayan messages. This statue, Pachamama, is Mother Earth. It's Gaia. It's the earth goddess. So now, as late as it was, I couldn't put this book down. And the more I looked, the more I found. Did you notice we turned a couple more red ones green down here? Okay. So I'm reading, and something said, look in the bibliography. So I flipped to the back, and I noticed that every one of the titles is in German. Eric von Däniken is German Swiss. Uber, intelligent. And in fact, several of the titles had the word Uber in it. And then, but what about experiments? Well, the more I read, I started reading, he was reading about these scientists in England that are trying to create hybrid creatures by crossing, this is scary stuff, humans with animals. Yeah, but the reason he brought it up is because the ancient civilizations did this as well. And that's why you see pictures such as this in ancient buildings at ancient sites in Egypt and other places like this. So I see this picture, and as I'm looking at it, Wolf steps in, right there in the bedroom again. And he says, have my dad send you my drawings of winged creatures. And I'm thinking, did you really draw winged creatures? So I pick up my iPad right there and there, send an email to Mike, and I said, did he draw winged creatures? If so, can you send me a picture? Look at this. Can you see the similarity? I hope so. I hope I'm not stretching this. We got the wing, we got the wing, we have the sash, we have the sash. Just amazing. So I called Mike and Beth the next day, and Beth said, I got to send you an email. I didn't realize she is playing detective, meanwhile, about these other things that they couldn't verify. And she said, look what I found out about hawks. Remember how he showed me a hawk and underlined it and gave me the number 14 for some reason right after that. She sent me this. The hawk, as a symbol, represents visionary power and guardianship. Hawks can live up to 14 years in the wild, and this 14 is significant. The 14th card in the tarot deck represents the teaching of higher expressions of psychism, that's psychic work, and vision. It holds the keys to higher levels of consciousness. My whole quest these days is to get the keys to higher levels of consciousness. So I'm thinking, is Wolf going to help me with this? The next day I get a call from this fellow. He's an artist out in Portland. And he asked me to do a reading for him. He said, I need guidance. And I have a very long waiting list. And normally I would say, I just don't do readings for guidance. I connect people with their loved ones, especially those who are really, really grieving. But I'm seeing this hawk in my mind's eye, and I'm thinking, this is the perfect chance to try this. Wolf, will you help me with this fellow here? Do the psychic work. So I said, I'll tell you what, I will do the reading for you privately. I'll ask for guidance for you and send you what I receive. So I did that. Just a couple nights later when I had some time and I was quiet, I got quiet and I asked, what guidance do you have for this fellow named Barry, this artist? And it just flowed. And now there's no feedback, so I'm not swayed by what he says. I don't know what he looks like. I just write and write and write and send it to him. And he wrote back and he said, how do you thank someone for saving their life? Direct from spirit is where that evidence came from. And how he thanked us is by sending us one of his paintings. This beautiful painting, 5 feet by 4 feet, which is exactly the space I was looking to fill in the reading room where I give readings. But you know what that painting's called? Because the name was right on the back? Going Home. Is that a coincidence? Coincidences are also known as synchronicity. It lets you know you're in the flow. Wolf said it was like going home to draw these things. My very first time that I just go for giving a sight rather than working it into a reading, it works out like that. So again, I call Mike and Beth, Wolf's parents, to share with them this really cool thing that happened when I listened to the message of the hawk. And I could tell that Mike wasn't really interested. He wasn't listening because he had something to share with me. He said, Suzanne, last night I was walking around the yard and I wandered by Wolf's old bedroom, and there was a smear on the window. You know why? Look at this. 3 weeks after the reading, a bird flies into the window. Not just any window, Wolf's bedroom. Kind of gives your whole image of how time works. It kind of puts it on its ear, doesn't it? Pretty cool. And so we just turned another one green. Are you getting a hint to my personality? So all of this cool stuff is unfolding all by itself, day by day, as we're on this road tour. Next stop on our road, Whitefish, Montana, because our nephew lives there, and he lives right near Glacier Park, so a great place to visit. And I remembered that we were there 2 years earlier, and they had a really cool metaphysical shop, a little rock shop. And I said to Ty, I'll see you later. There's something for me in that store. It wasn't just that I had to go in. I could feel the pull. So I walked into the shop, and I'm looking around, and I'm not sensing anything. And the owner stepped out from behind. And she and I looked at each other, and we locked eyes. And she said, I remember you 2 years ago. And I said, yeah, I remember you too. Nice to see you. And I'm walking around looking for stuff, and I'm looking, and every once in a while we'd look at each other and look away. You know, it was kind of awkward. Finally she said, I don't know why I'm saying this, but you want to meet somewhere and talk? And I looked at her and I said, we're supposed to talk. And she said, I know. And I said, tomorrow's my birthday, and cool stuff has happened on my birthday the last 4 years. So I have a feeling this is part of it. Let's meet at XYZ Cafe at 10 o'clock. She said, okay. And as soon as we made that appointment, the urge to be there went away. And I heard it was not something, but someone. So, okay. Ty was happy. I left empty-handed. No more rocks, you know. So we go into this cafe the next morning. I'm alone, and I met with the owner. This is a picture I pulled off the internet. I'm sorry, it's fuzzy, but her name is Velvet. And we're sitting there. It's my birthday. She wishes me happy birthday. And she goes, I don't know what we're supposed to talk about. And I said, I don't either, but you know, I think I'm supposed to tell you about this guy named Wolf that's been really playing a big role in my life lately. And so I started to tell her Wolf's story, beginning with the Burial Hill story, and the lightning, and the roses, and the poem. And she reaches up to her neck, it's hard to see it here, and she says, do you know what this is? And I looked at it, and I said, no, I don't. And she said, it's fulgurite. She owns a rock shop, she should know. And I said, I've never heard of that. And she said, it's sand that forms a hard tube when it's struck by lightning. And it's kind of ugly thing to wear around your neck. But she said that fulgurite allegedly holds the power of that force that struck it. And then if you wear it, it gives you that power. And if you say a prayer and blow through it, it's supposed to make your prayers even more powerful. And she said to me, would you like to have it? And I'm like to have it? Give me that necklace. No, I didn't. Actually, what I said was, would you really take that off and give it to me? And this really shows you where she was coming from. As she's taking it off, she said, I have no attachment to things. Perfect. So she gave it to me. And she went on to tell me that she had been leaving crystals in different locations around the Rocky Mountains to help strengthen the energetic grid around our planet. Now, I might have thought that that was some of that woo-woo stuff, you know? Except for what happened to me 2 years earlier on my birthday. I woke up in the morning and I got a download from my guides. They're telling me all kinds of unusual things, unusual terms that I'd never heard before, including this one term that when I wrote it down, I thought, I had never heard this, and if this is a real thing, this is a whole new level. This is what I wrote down. Stellated dodecahedron. Who hears things like that? You know? Huh. But I had brought back with me a stack of books because I'd gone home to visit Mom, went back to the coach, and had a stack of brand new books. Hadn't opened them yet, but as I'm looking at this word, I'm hearing, look in that book right there. So I pulled that book out of the stack, go to the index in the back, and burst into tears, because there it was. And when I turned to page 72 to see what stellated dodecahedron was, it kind of took my breath away. It's this alleged grid around the planet, also known as the Christ consciousness grid, which has nothing to do with whether you're a Christian or a Jew or whatever. It's those who understand that we are one with the force that animates us. They understand unity, the unity of all that is. That's a level of consciousness that we're all aiming to achieve. And as we realize that we are one with everything, I was told in meditation later that morning, it's like we light up one more light in that grid. And it's not quite lighted up yet. This is an actual map of lights around the world, but I was shown in meditation that the goal is to get all the lights around the world lighted by sharing messages of love with each other, to raise the consciousness, the frequency of the whole, so that ultimately, as each person comes into alignment with their true self, that grid is lighted, and we're all heart-centered. So when Velvet is telling me that she's planting crystals along the Rocky Mountains to help strengthen this grid, I didn't just blow it off as New Age nonsense. I paid attention. She said, I still have one more left to put out there, but I'm not sure when I'm going to get there. I said, where's that? She said, Lake Louise up in Alberta, Canada. And it went like this. I said, guess where our next stop is? Of course. And I said, would you like me to take the crystal to Lake Louise for you? I thought she'd want to do it herself. She said, no, that would be great. So she gave me a crystal to take Lake Louise. And off we went to Banff, which is gorgeous, just 30 miles south of Lake Louise. And we stop at the campground there in Banff. And this was our view from the coach. I mean, just gorgeous place. We're going back next summer. But you know, as beautiful as it was, I was having trouble concentrating because these buses kept going by our coach in the campground. Look at these buses. All the buses had wolves on them. So it's very remote up there. They didn't have a cell phone signal. I have to post the daily messages that I get from my group, Sanaya, online every morning. So the next morning after we get to Banff, I take my laptop to this hostel that's about 100 yards away from our campsite. I'm going to walk in the front door to pick up their internet signal, stop in my tracks, because here's a poster advertising upcoming concerts that summer. Look who's playing. It's Pachamama. Are you beginning to get the picture now of how interconnected everything is? It's surreal. It's like being in two worlds at once, isn't it? And it's so cool. So now we're into August. And as you may have gathered, every morning I sit in meditation, and when I get deep enough, I connect with my team of helpers, who we call Sanaya, and I say, please give me a message for whoever needs to hear it today. And then I publish it on Sanaya Says. And so in August, the first thing they said one morning, you can go back on the blog and see it, was snowshoes. Snowshoes. I said, why are you talking about snowshoes in August? And they said, trust us, and went on to talk about the web that a snowshoe has. I thought, okay. And then the next morning, I get a poem. But I knew it was just for me. And it flowed straight through. I'll read it in case you can't see it in the back. In meditation, I hear, now you see what it means to be free, no longer encumbered as the one who still slumbered, but awaken now to who and what you are. You had no need to go far, for the answers were there, hidden in plain sight. They came to you at night when you wrote without a light, and will continue now apace as you see the wolf's strong face. He brings you guidance as you asked. With this job he has been tasked. For it's all a great big web, which is what has oft been said. When you see the strands, you know this is how you're supposed to grow. Just relax now, settle back as your desires you attack and the ego you release. This is the road to peace. I didn't post that one because I felt it was for me, all about this thing that's going on with wolf. But as I'm thinking about it, in the snowshoes, there's a web, and they're talking about a web, this vision came into my eye, and it was the eye from Wolf's poem. And I see this thing on the left, and I thought, what is that? So I pick up the phone, and I called Mike and Beth, and I said, what is that? And he said, it's a dream catcher. Now, I had only heard of Dreamcatchers once before because there's only one person I know who had a Dreamcatcher, my stepdaughter, Susan. I really didn't know what Dreamcatchers were for, so I decided to do a search online. And I went onto Google and I entered meaning of Dreamcatchers. And the very first result that came up, I clicked on it, and here's what we got. The Wolf's Den creation, with this quote by Chief Seattle, says, humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. Does that sound just like the poem I was given just that morning, just seconds before being shown the Dreamcatcher? And I thought, okay, is this just a synchronicity? Is this just a coincidence? So I said, all right, I'll change my search parameters. Instead of meaning of Dreamcatcher, I went back and I typed in significance of Dreamcatcher and pulled up the very first result that came up with that one. And it's all about Dreamcatchers being like the webbing for snowshoes. Do you see why I listen when Sanaya speaks? It's amazing. So suddenly, I have to have a Dreamcatcher. But here we are in Lake Louise now, even more remote than Banff. We've moved up 30 miles north. This is the sum total of all of the shops and all of the shopping in Lake Louise area. What are the chances that there will be a dream catcher there? What are the chances? Yes, 100%. I go in and I get my dream catcher. But now I'm on a mission. Ty unfortunately pulled his back and he was flat out in the coach. But this allowed me to have a very quiet time when I go to leave this crystal at Lake Louise for velvet back in Whitefish, Montana. If you haven't been to Lake Louise, you might want to go there now that you see these pictures. This is Lake Louise. And all of the tourists hang around up here at the beginning. Not so many want to walk all this way, but I was heard, walk to the end. We will have a gift for you. Very clear. So I started walking and I decided to make it a very meditative experience. So I put on some headphones with my iPhone and I was listening to some music, some hemisync music that gets your brain into a state of coherence. And I was listening to this Andean music that I had been drawn to the whole week before I found the book that moved. And I realized, of course, this Andean music was significant, but I'm hearing there is a better choice. I'm thinking, a better choice than my Andean music? I looked down at my iPhone and started laughing. I had bought this hemisync music, like 8 CDs at once, and didn't even realize what was on my phone. Look what it was. Dreamcatcher. Hemisync's Dreamcatcher. So they say, go to the end of the lake, there'll be a gift for you. So I just walked as I listened to the Dreamcatcher, tried to make it a sacred time because I'm on this sacred mission. And I got to the end and picked this beautiful spot sitting on a rock. Now, I was alone, but I had somebody later take my picture so I could share this moment with you. I wasn't quite sure what to do with this crystal. Notice how this little critter came up and was talking to me there. So I have this crystal and I thought, well, we'll just do a little ceremony. And I knew what the purpose of it was. So I said a prayer over it, that my leaving it there would help strengthen the grid and that all of us would be able to light up the grid eventually through our higher consciousness. And I just took that crystal and tossed it way out into the middle of Lake Louise and prayed that it would do some good being there. And as soon as I did that, I heard, look up. And I looked up and the tears just started flowing. This is my picture that I took a second later. See those angel wings? Is that my imagination? It's all interconnected, folks. So I figured I should start heading back, and I reached down to get my music and pick it up, which was sitting on the rock, and I just couldn't help but laugh. Dreamcatcher had finished the final song, Balance Restored. I had never even listened to this album before. So I wanted, as I said, I wanted to capture this sacred moment. And there was one lady sitting on a rock about 30 yards away. So I trotted over with my camera and I said, I can see you're having a moment here and I'm sorry to bother you, but would you take my picture? Because I just had a moment too. And we looked at each other and just like in that store, we caught each other's eye. And it was like looking into each other's soul. There was this moment of love. It was just pure soul communication. And she said, I'll take your picture. So I went back. She took my picture. I went back to get my camera, and she allowed me to take her picture. Why? Because I said, what are you doing here? And we started chatting. And what she was doing was leaving crystals at Lake Louise. Can you believe that? I'd never even heard of this. There's a reason that I've covered up her face here. Now, I mentioned that we shared this moment, this soul moment. But the more we talked, all of a sudden I started sensing there's something not quite right here. And the more this woman talked, the more the hair on my arm started to stand on end. And I realized that we were dealing with a case of mental illness here. Tremendous paranoia. Tremendous, to the point that I just wanted to run away. And I finally did say, I'm sorry, I have to leave now. And as I stepped away, I remembered. Remember that look we shared? And what would people have said of Wolf if they had met him here? Would they have been scared? Yet I saw right past that, before I got to know her, straight into the soul. An incredible message. So by the next day, Ty's back was better. We decided to go for a drive. And they have this beautiful place there called the Icefield Parkway you can see glaciers even in August up there. And we're driving along, and Ty took some pictures and posted them on his blog. I know a lot of you followed our travels this summer through Ty's blog, Life as Ty Sees It. It's like living with Dave Barry, and your whole life is on display. And he sent that out, and this girl who had no idea what was going on in my life wrote an email the next day, and she said, "You've caught a wolf." And I said, "What?" She said, "Look at your picture. It's a wolf. Do you see it? Look." Amazing. And one other person wrote and said the same thing. "That lake looks like a perfect wolf." It's just too much. So we spent a couple weeks in Canada, and this new coach of ours, thank goodness it's under warranty, it had some major problems. So instead of heading back where we were supposed to go, we decided to return to Colorado, where we bought it on the spur of the moment, spontaneously, my fault, in Colorado. So we're going back through customs, coming back into the United States, and I hear very clearly, "We will have a gift for you in Colorado." That sounds cool. Okay. So while the coach is being worked on, I get an email from some fellow. He says, "I noticed in your husband's blog that you're back in Colorado, in Longmont. I live here. I would love to meet you." I said, "Great, let's meet." We agreed to meet at Starbucks. So I meet this fellow at Starbucks, and we chat for a while. He pulled out a couple of my books and asked me to sign them, and then he said, "And I have a gift for you." I thought, a gift, how cool. And he pulls out this book that he thought that I might be interested in. This one here by a woman named Little Grandmother, a shaman, a white woman who became a shaman. The Message for the Tribe of Many Colors. But what caught my eye was this, a little picture of a spiral on the cover. Why? Because it was one of those shapes that Wolf brought up in the reading, the actual reading. Pyramids, triangles, spirals, and all these shapes he talked about. I have a particular interest in shapes because there's this field of interest called sacred geometry. Here's a definition of it. It's a way of looking at the symbolic values of shapes in a way that help our souls grow. It provides a framework for our experiences and helps us to see life and our role in life in relation to everything else. So sacred geometry fascinates me, and I knew that certain shapes are repeated throughout nature and they have meaning associated with those. The spiral is going to become very important to our discussion in a couple of minutes here. But meanwhile, because of that spiral, I started reading that book, because of that spiral, that very day. And it didn't take long to start shaking my head at yet more synchronicities, like this one. As Little Grandmother talked about, higher dimensional energies pouring down to Earth. These energies are becoming activated within the crystals, supercharging Mother Earth's energy grid. Wisdom keepers have been placing these spirals in specific places around the Earth over the last 3 years. Now here's something I hadn't even heard of till a couple weeks before, and I just did it myself, and it pops up in this gift of a book. So I kept reading, and look what she says. Just what Sanaya told me 2 years earlier when they gave me the stellated dodecahedron thing. There were dots of light in various places all over the planet. The rest was blackness. These points of light are the souls living today whose hearts are in alignment, those who've raised their frequency and are living from the heart. Beautiful message. But I still haven't figured out, of all those things that are coming together, what is it? Do you remember there was the Mayan book that moved, and Pachamama was a Mayan goddess? And then the two things at the bottom about Native American, indigenous people, Indians, that had not been solved yet. I turned to the next page, the next chapter, and pretty much stopped breathing for a second. As this gift of a book says, there are two great ancient civilizations today that hold the keys to living from the heart. The Mayans and the Aboriginal people. They still live from the heart. Mayans and Aboriginal people, that might be a stretch there, but I looked up Aboriginal and it means indigenous people. And what is the message here? They're the ones teaching us now to live from the heart again. And I thought, is this the final piece of the puzzle? Is this web starting to make sense now? But as if I needed further proof, I turn the page and look what it says. The time of the lone wolf is over. We are on the verge of a massive shift of consciousness that will change how we relate to each other and how we feel inside. I knew that all of this was happening for a reason. You don't just get this evidence and all these visits for no reason at all. It had to have some meaning. This guy, Wolf, was insistent, and now it's all coming together. A massive shift of consciousness. The time of the lone wolf is over. This is what 2012 was really all about. No coincidence that all of this came through in a book about 2012. 2012 was really about the alignment of our solar system with the center of the galaxy coming into alignment. And if you listen to people who are sensitive to energy, they say that this is a time of higher energies pouring into our world, affecting us and allowing us to raise our consciousness ever higher. And many people are feeling that. Many people are now able to tap into the other world. I didn't have this ability that I have now until about 5 years ago. Was not aware of it at all. And our task here and now is to come into alignment with our true self. And I'm going to show you how it was shown to me to do that. There's always a link between the physical and the non-physical world. And this is where sacred geometry helps us. So follow along with me here. This is an actual photo of a galaxy, an entire galaxy. And just as we have spirals, that form that Wolf brought up and that was on this gift of a book, at a very large scale, we certainly have them at smaller scales throughout our lives, don't we? And even smaller scales in our sinks and bathtubs. They're everywhere. They're even in our energy field. If you're familiar with the energy centers within each of us known as chakras, the energy flows in and out of us in a spiral form. And the lower 3 chakras are where we exchange energy with the earthly energies. The upper 3 exchange energy with our spirit side, the pure energy side with the heavens. The heart is the bridge between the two worlds. The bridge between the two. And this suddenly got me to thinking, have I been out of alignment? If any of you have listened to the 10-minute transformation meditation that's on my website about clearing your chakras, I lead it by telling people to envision themselves sitting in a shaft of white light. Until this point in my life, I've been pulling in that energy from above. But now I was receiving guidance to pull it in from the earth as well, because we are physical beings and spirit beings at once. And as soon as I started trying that, I had more energy at the end of my readings, instead of being as drained as I always was. So it's an interesting thing. If you're just pulling energy in from one end, you're out of balance. Remember that word balance was so important in the whole reading with the yin-yang symbol, balance. If you have 2 spirals coming together, an interesting shape results. This shape, and it's known as a torus, and it comes up throughout nature. Very common, much more common than most of us are aware. Actual technology has shown your physical heart puts off an energetic field around you. If we had you hooked up right now, you'd see it. It looks like this, the torus. Okay? But as above, so below, and vice versa. This shape is also reflected on a larger scale. Is this just an artist's conception? This one is, yes, as is this one, straight off the NASA website. This energy field exists around our Earth as well, and it exists around us. And remember what I said about balance. If we're only coming from the head, we're out of balance. We need to come from the heart as well. And this is the message that we're getting at here. This spiral is the perfect symbol of eternal life, of regeneration. And those who have passed to the other side and come back to tell about it, also known as near-death experiences, like Dr. Eben Alexander, talk about what? A tunnel, right? And in fact, Eben described his as a spiral. If you follow the spiral, where does it take you? Right to the core. And what is the core of you? The heart. right there at the center. And remember what the message is that I was ultimately led to. They're teaching us now, the ancients, to live from the heart again. We humans are out of alignment with our true nature. We're unbalanced spiritually, energetically, prisoners of the ego, which comes from the head. Wolf was considered unbalanced to many, based on his mental state. But based on the heart, he more than made up for that. But he certainly knew what it felt like to be a prisoner, and this was reflected in quite a few of his drawings. Drew chains across his heart in several of them. And remember, kept repeating this familiar theme. He wanted to go home. He chose to go home so he could get this message out to people that we need to find freedom. The wolf's message is freedom. Freedom from the ego, the part of us that makes us think we're separate from each other. How do you find freedom? By seeking balance. We can't come from the heart all the time, but what if we come from the head most of the time? Then we're out of balance. I think we're out of balance as a species. When we come from the head, we're all about the physical world. We focus on the body, we use our mind for reasoning, for logic. That's okay. But are you in balance? When you come from the heart, that's the spirit part of you that you're coming from. You're using emotion and intuition to sense things. The heart brings us to a place of unity. The head, the ego, when you're there, it's all about me versus you, us versus them, separation. When we're in the head, we focus on the past and our thoughts, right? And focusing on the past brings pain. And when we're in the head, we focus on the future. Our thoughts take us to the future. And focusing on the future brings fear. But if you go to the heart and be present, being present brings peace. And this is Wolf's message. When you're in alignment with your true self, the one that is both physical and spirit, you're in alignment. And you can choose whether you're going to come from the head or come from the heart. And when you come from the heart, the result of that is compassion and understanding, tolerance of ourselves and others, patience for ourselves and others. Those things don't come from the head. The labyrinth that came up in Wolf's reading is the perfect symbol of this. If you walk a labyrinth, it's symbolic of leaving the physical world behind as you go to your center. And as you come back out from the center, you're a changed person because now you're more in balance. Always away from the ego, back to the heart. This physical world is full of duality, polar opposites. And that's the way it's supposed to be. That's how we learn, isn't it? I mean, there will always be people who think directly opposite from you, within your family, in your circle of friends. And that's what makes us think we're separate. But you know, maybe that's not so bad. It's okay. It's how we learn because it gives us a chance to ask questions, to make choices. How am I going to respond to this? We have free will. We get to choose. So when you see somebody that thinks different from you, that has a different belief system than you do, picture that that's okay. They're just the opposite for now in this world of duality, and when we come from the head, we're all involved in this dance, always seeking harmony. But when you see that all of this makes up the whole with understanding, then you can shift your focus and using your free will, go to a higher place. I'll give you an example of this. One way to look at this is that we're all participating in this dance of consciousness, right here and now in this physical world. But if it gets too uncomfortable and you want to sit it out for a while, using your consciousness, you ride that spiral of consciousness right up to the center of you, the heart, the core of you. It's like going up to the balcony and looking down on the dancers now. You rise above your problems. So down here, When you're aware of the physical world coming from the mind, that's the world of polarities. Up here is the world of peace, where you can be centered and make choices. When we're dancing, we're experiencing life. We're caught up in the drama. Don't we do that all the time? We get so caught up in our trials and challenges. This causes stress, lower vibrations, and definitely the sense of separation. But at any moment, realizing we are spirit beings as well as human beings, and we can make this choice with our free will, we just rise above and view everything as the witness, the observer. And from that state, now you're neutral, and you can look down on your life and all of its dramas and say my favorite phrase, thank you. Isn't that interesting? Now, isn't that interesting a heck of a lot more peaceful than cursing, going and, just having a fit? And you get to that place by riding the spiral with your consciousness. Think about it. Where is the calm place in any storm? The eye, the center, and look at the shape of this. It's a spiral. Inside the eye, even though everything outside is chaos, inside of you is this place where you can always find peace, no matter what is going on in your life. It's the center of your true self, and it's always there. And it's there in the center that you discover through personal experience this truth, that you are that light. You are the light. We're all beings of light. And Wolf wanted to go to his true home. He left this reality to show us that. So let's leave the illusion of separation behind. Go back to Antelope Canyon for a minute here to have another way of looking at ourselves and our place in this world. In this world, we think that everything is solid, like these beautiful rocks here. But break down even the hardest, most solid thing, and the rocks break down to sand. Break it down even further into its natural elements, and what are you left with? Vibrating energy. And this may appear solid, but it's nothing but light. At your basic essence, all of you are that light. And you don't access it here, you access it here. And you can access it anytime, any place, by sitting in the silence. Getting to know the part of you that is true spirit, your primordial state. Wolf used to give people heart-shaped stones as gifts. In fact, it's the very last thing he did. In that cafe, he gave somebody a heart-shaped stone and said, I have to go now. But the gift that he leaves all of us is how to come back into alignment with our true self, how to find compassion and understanding for each other by realizing as a species, we're out of balance. And you're never going to find that balance when you're only in the head. There's nothing wrong with being in the head, but when you balance it with the heart, that's where we connect with each other. Not through here, through here. Can you feel it? That's where you feel it, in the heart. If you have trouble feeling that connection, you can activate your heart in a second. How? It's easy. Just think of the many blessings in your life. What are you grateful for? Remember this field that's around the human body? Scientifically proven we have this field. And true feelings of gratitude, appreciation, and other positive emotions synchronize the head and the heart, brain and heart rhythms, creating a body-wide shift to a scientifically measurable state called coherence. What is coherence? A unified whole. The result is simply the pure joy of being. The result is that we end up loving each other for who we really are inside, not what we see on the outside. Wolf wanted people to know this. He wanted people to know this, as he said in that unexpected reading, on a global scale, as in all of humanity. When you come from this kind of mindset, the result is freedom. The wolf stands for freedom. In this case, freedom from what? From being a prisoner to our heads. That freedom leads to balance. And what is the result of balance? Just like he wrote in his poem, peace and tranquility flow like water. The wolf comes when we most need guidance in our lives. He showed us that we're out of balance at a time when we most need it, but he's also shown us how to find that balance. And the beautiful part about being a human in this physical world is that we're given choices in every moment, whether to come from the heart or whether to the head, or whether to respond with love. And this reminds me of a story that I read, and it's very, very fitting that it has to do with a Native American, that symbol that came up in the reading, about an Indian grandfather talking with his grandson about a tragedy that had happened in their village recently. And don't we always read about tragedies in our villages, not these villages, but our towns, where humankind does cruel things to other humans. And this grandfather said to his grandson, I feel as if there are two wolves inside of me. One judges and wants revenge, and it's a constant battle with the other one who understands and feels compassion. And the grandson said, Grandfather, which one will win? And the grandfather replied, the one I feed. Which one will you feed? The one that judges and sees us all as separate, or the one that understands who and what we are and why we act out of ignorance of who and what we are, and from that understanding replies and responds with compassion? Wolf understood this at a soul level. Here's someone who was diagnosed as lesser than most of us, but he was one of the most highly developed souls I've ever brought through in a one-on-one reading. He was living in two worlds at once. All of us are, because we are all spirit now, temporarily in human form. Some of us visit that world all the time, but we can turn it off. He couldn't turn it off. But we access one world through the head and the other world that's all around us through the heart. Wolf went out in a dramatic way with an amazing story, so we remember this message. He knew his mission was going to continue. He wanted to go home, but his mission will continue from the other side. And he left us lessons in how to find peace and tranquility and awaken the spirit within, so that each one of us will go through and go forth from this room lighting up our lights so that we light up the world. Thank you. And just to show you, here are the goodies, the little extra, how this whole story has come full circle. Remember how I met Mike and Beth at this conference with Dr. Eben Alexander? Well, we finished our 5-month tour, and I got home. I was home for 6 days, and off I went to Greece to speak at an international conference with Dr. Eben Alexander, and had a lot of fun, a very special time, and I got to give this presentation, the Heart Gifts Talk, for the first time for that group. What was really special is that Mike and Beth were there, and they were a mess, just crying. It was terrible. But immediately after that presentation, we joined them on the beach where they renewed their wedding vows, which was really cool. But even more cool and surprising to me was they asked me to perform the ceremony. So that was neat. I ended up leading that. And then the next day we went on a tour of sites around Crete. And we ended up at this monastery here. And Mike called me over. He said, Suzanne, look at this. Right there, a special date at this monastery was September 8th, the day Wolf died. And then he came up to me with this look of shock on his face. He said, you won't believe what they're doing inside the church. Do you remember how many of Wolf's drawings had the chains across the heart? You saw these? In this monastery, and by the way, look at that orb right there. In this church, these Greek Orthodox nuns had this set of chains that they had used to strap to this pillar this icon of Mary that kept being stolen. And people, it would end up back there and they would strap it to the pillar with chains. Well, these days they use those very chains and people go in the chapel and they strap them across your heart as you kiss the icon. We couldn't believe it. They do this for healing. I looked at Mike and Beth and we said, we have to do this. And we just were crying as we had the chains put around our hearts for healing. We went from that place to this beachside town, and Mike and Beth came up to me again, just shaking their head. They said, we walked up this cliff. We walked past Cafe Michael, past the Dolphin Cafe, and found this. Can you see the Indian? Like he's standing on a cliff looking out. And then they took a picture of this right next to it. It's a message. Look at this symbol right here. It's an arrow, and it's a message chiseled in stone. I think it's actually in memory of somebody who must have fallen off the cliff because it says, we demand the truth. But down here, chiseled in this stone next to the Indian on the cliff, it says, rest in peace. I know that Wolf is not resting right now. He's very active on the other side, but he's also certainly very much at peace and helping us to find that peace and tranquility within ourselves. And how do we find that? We get out of the head to the heart. Thank you so much.